So, a big welcome to each one as we are looking at the action research projects for school teachers. And I want to introduce now some resources that you can use. Firstly, if you go to the college library and have a look at action research and then narrow it down, action research in education, then you'll find some excellent resources. And if you go to Google and if you go to Google Scholar, and put in action research and then narrow it down in education, in primary or high school, and in the subject areas that you're looking at, you'll find some excellent resources. For instance, when I typed it in, it brought up Paul Mayne's Action Research in the Classroom, a Teacher's Guide, and I've put the web address here. And Paul Mayne begins with the question, what is action research? And you might have a paragraph or so that you want to write about action research and what it is. And action research is an inquiry method that scholars, researchers, and educators and teachers in schools often will use in order to develop their skills and practice and understanding. And within the context of schools, it provides teachers with a development of reflective knowledge at a very professional level. And I like the students who've used the word evidence-based. So it's evidence-based research into what is working. And the great thing about evidence-based is that it's sometimes different to what we suspect, and that's a really good breakthrough when we find something that's a bit different to what we expect. And Paul Mayne says the first step is to establish your question. So you need to think about what's interesting, what's valuable, what's an issue, and what's doable. And we only have a few weeks to do it, 12 weeks for the subject and a few weeks at the end to finish things up and a few weeks at the beginning. So you might only have a few weeks to do the project. So you need to think, what can you do? But already some of my students have pointed out that they have other data at the school on the students. And if you de-identify the data, then you can put that on your ethics form, and that carries well because you can point out that it's been de-identified. And if you point out on the ethics form that this has benefits to the students and benefits to the school, that's very helpful as well. Having established a question that's doable, that's interesting, that's relevant, and this means that you have some students or teachers that you can interview and gather information on as you apply a teaching method, say, you then should begin with a literature review where you gather more information in existing literature about the area you're going to be looking at. And you also want to find strategies and solutions that others have worked upon, because scholars and researchers rarely do work in isolation from one another. Usually they interact with one another, they look at the cutting edge in their field of research, they go to university libraries, they go to Google Scholar, they collect scholarly articles, and they find out as much as they can about the issues that they're looking at. And I know when I talk to teachers, when they have a scholarly understanding, then that's powerful professionalism. It shows that they're experts in their field, and that carries a lot of weight. And when they apply for new work opportunities and job opportunities, that's also very, very useful. Then you have to decide on the methodology. So after identifying the problem, reviewing the relevant literature, you've got to decide what's the method, what's the plan of action that you're going to use. And so we have one student who's an art teacher who's going to use the teaching of history as a way of increasing creativity and helping with creativity. We have others who are English or literacy teachers from prep and kindergarten through to year 1 and 2. And so they've got different strategies for developing reading and writing skills, and they're going to research this and then they're going to implement it. Usually it's very important to have a baseline. That is, where are we starting from? And so the baseline data may already be established by your school, or you may have baseline data whereby you give out an initial quiz or questionnaire in order to establish where they're at. And then, having gathered the baseline data, you deliver your teaching method where you're seeking to show that you have a teaching method that's effective. And then you collect a second set of data and see whether your teaching method has worked. And you take note of some students may have lower abilities, they may have different personalities, others have higher abilities and other personalities. Which ones have shown the most success? Which methods have shown the most success? Some of the methods that you could use for collecting data include pre and post tasks or surveys or questionnaires. You might interview them. You might have semi-structured interviews. You might even have a group of students talking to one another. You might make observations and describe their work. You might collect work samples before you use your teaching method, after you use your teaching method. You might also get viewpoints and opinions from other teachers who are willing to input. You might get professional input. And then you might analyse certain documents, or you might do a quiz. And then the next step is to analyse the data that you've collected. And so the first steps, literature review, and then carry out your method. And before you do that, you have your baseline data, and now you have your data after you've carried out your method. Then you analyse the data, and you can go back and collect more literature review information, and then you draw your conclusions from the analysis of the data. These things appear to work, and then you could look at, what do we know from neuroscience? What do we know from teaching pedagogy that explain? What are some of the reasons why this works? And it's good if you sometimes find 2 or 3 different theories about why things work or why things don't work. And then you suggest that in the future there might be modification to educational theory, that there might be future research plans, there might be repetition. And so after concluding your action research project and carrying out your actions and then measuring the success or limitations of your actions, you suggest further research that may follow. One example that I've put up from Robert Ojeda, Instructional Strategies for Teaching Pre-Algebra to a Diverse Group of Learners, began with a statement of the problem and the purpose of the study, the terms that would be used and the research questions, and then moved to stage 2, carrying out the literature review and outlining the methodology. Some people focus on assessments. Some people focus on teaching methods. Some people focus on teaching materials. Whichever method, you then begin to look at how it's gone, and you collect the data and record the data, and then you analyse and study the results. And so here we have a number of study results that have been collected, and then you draw your conclusions. You write concerns and limitations and references, and there's lots and lots of examples of action research projects that you can find by going to your college library or Google Scholar or other resources. Another action research example is that by Spencer Clark and Susan Poharth and Julie Thiel and Morgan Jobe, and they have put together a whole book whereby you can look up the chapters there. And so if you pause the video or take notes from today, or take a screenshot or take a photo of this, then you can go to the college library that we have described here, and you can look up each of these chapters. So here we have a description of what action research involves. And then if we go to chapter 1, we can look up the application of action research to teachers. And so you can see some insights here on how teachers can use action research to improve their teaching methods and improve that which is done in schools. Then you can go to how action research can help you in your professional development in chapter 2. And then after that, you can go on to chapter 3, where it gives some guidelines for developing the questions and plan for your action research project. And then it also suggests how to analyze the answers that you get. It describes some practical issues, and then it also looks at how it can be applied. Another resource that you can find is that in the Western Sydney University article on action research, and I find this quite useful in that it contains a lot of very practical insights that you could look at there. And these practical insights include where you can start thinking about how you can intervene in the learning of the students. There's some nice resources here on projects, and then there's some further resources that you could draw on. So I thought that's quite a nice guideline to action research. And then there's other examples of projects that you could have a look at as well. So clearly, in doing a research project like this, we need to be careful with our research methods. So research is like science. It's seeking to identify through evidence-based studies what can help us to be more effective, what evidence can we provide for this. And it involves asking the right questions. It involves doing the literature review of what others have studied and written about, and how this has been verified by other scholars. And then it seeks to gather data by first establishing a baseline in how students are going at the moment, or how teachers are going at the moment. And then it implements an experiment, something that it can be varied. And we talk about these variables, such as the way students learn, such as the way we teach. And then we collect data by implementing our experiment, and then we analyze the data and we look more deeply at what we find, and then we draw conclusions, and then we communicate what we have found. So it's a fairly standard research method that's used in many subjects, but particularly in education. And this will be very useful for you in your education career, but it'll also be a very useful activity for you in this project that we're working on in this subject. So I encourage you to choose something that's interesting, something that's valuable, something that's doable, and something that you have some passion about, in order that you might be able to expand your understanding of these areas that you're passionately interested in and developing professional expertise in. So let's go back now and just ask these 3 students what they are looking at doing, and then also how they're looking at going about their projects. And so if I start with Kate, so again, just outlining what you're doing, Kate, and then how you'll go about it. And what year are stage 4 students in, Kate? The unmute.
Sorry, I just don't want you to have to hear my family while I'm listening to you. So I have a year 8 class, which is mixed ability. And it's literally like from kids who are writing at a really high level right down to kids who have pretty severe limitations for a variety of reasons. So and my school is really big on visible learning. So that's kind of tying in really nicely with the explicit teaching strategies. So I'm just going to minimize the view because I've made some notes about what I'm thinking. So I have collected, so we're working on like a structured writing hang on a minute. Oh, everything's happening here.
I like that idea of structured writing as a.
Yeah, so we use like a scaffold to get them to learn just how to do like it's a peel, point, example, explanation, and a link sentence. And they write pretty much everything we're talking about in class. That's the format, and that's leading towards, obviously in senior years, an essay based format. So they've been working on that, and so the things that I'm going to start trying to do with them, first of all, just really explicitly laying out the scaffold of what that looks like. I can't see past that. I'm just going to close the.
And that's so valuable, isn't it? In that whatever area you go into, whether it be art or whatever, you've got to write essays.
Yeah.
On into year 10, 11, 12, and on into post-secondary education.
Yeah.
And all of this is,
it helps them learn how to answer a question formally. So the first thing that I'm doing is just modeling what that looks like for them, and then giving them a good example and a non-example, like this is what it does look like, this is what it really doesn't look like, this is like not meeting the criteria. We're working on a lot of vocabulary, so the kinds of words that you would use in an introductory sentence, the kind of linking words. So just giving them words like demonstrate and convey. The author conveys, like words that not just the meta language of the subject, but actually building text that's helpful for them. So vocab, and also the meta language around the units of work that we're working on. Then we're working on writing conventions. I'm looking at whether collaborating in small groups to produce a paragraph is helpful, whether that's better done in a graded, like put the high kids together and the low kids together, or whether it's better to do a mixed ability group. And then just the impact of feedback, and teacher feedback and peer feedback. So I've just got those range of things that I want to run them through, and just sort of getting a gauge on what, out of all of those things, what is actually best improving their output, basically.
I love it. Really, there's probably 4 or 5 research projects going on there, but I think that's quite legitimate. So modelling is one project and demonstration is similar, and then building vocab is another project, and then group work is another project, and then feedback is another project. But these are combined together, and I think that's all very legitimate. And all of these things are worthy of research. And with research, we are wanting to see what is most important. And so I like the way you're keeping an eye out for some of these things are going to be of high level importance. And you may even be able to rank these sort of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 and say, these appear to be most important and these appear to be of lesser importance. And so I think there's lots of valuable insights that will come from this. And then there can be theory behind it as well. So there may be
the theory behind it is to do with cognitive load. So that's where I'm going with that in terms of educational theory.
And certainly that's well worth keeping an eye on it as the theory. And not everyone loves the theory or whatever, but it's worth showing some good understanding of that. That's excellent. And then if we go back to Amy with art history, so what are you thinking now of doing? I love Amy's project. So it's high school, year 8, year 9, year 10, and the way in which creativity can be aided by art history. So Amy, do you have thoughts on that?
Yes. One of my main thoughts at the moment is how I'm going to define creativity. I think that a significant part of my literature review will be looking at creativity within high school visual arts and what that looks like and what's that's defined by. But then, and then, yeah, the other half of my methodology will be looking at the impact of content versus process in visual arts curriculums and in visual arts classrooms, and just seeing what is already there and what people already think about that balance between content and skill in visual arts. And then for my methodology at the moment, I'm thinking of having 2 groups within those 2 classes. So 2 groups in year 8 and then 2 groups in the year 9 and 10 elective class. And obviously after the research project, the other group will get taught the other half of it. So it's fair and ethical. But yeah, the control group will be very briefly introduced to the topic of, yeah, like what you said before, an example of surrealism. So they're very briefly introduced to surrealism. And then 90% of classwork is just focused on making and art making. And that's what the stage 4 syllabus recommends for visual arts, is that 90% of their work is focused on art making. And that shifts a little bit in year 9 and 10. And then the intervention group will be introduced to the topic, but also introduced to the context, the key ideas, the main artists, the main techniques. And then they will make art based on the topic as well. But the split will be more like 40% content and 60% art making. And so then my data collection will be looking at the work between those 2 groups. And I guess my understanding of creativity at the moment is being able to pull ideas together in unique ways. And so I'm interested to see how the students with more content knowledge can pull those ideas that they've learnt into artworks, and what the students who don't have that content knowledge do. And just, yeah, look at the difference in sophistication of works between the 2 groups, with one group having more things to draw on.
And isn't it fascinating, the irony that the more examples you give a person and teach them, the more likely they are to be creative.
Yeah.
Because the more roads you present before them, the more
Yeah.
likely they are to explore those roads in which to find out more original ways of doing things. Whereas if you leave them to themselves, they tend to repeat what they've already picked up on safe ways of expression,
Yes.
don't you? It's which seems counterintuitive to some.
Yeah.
By showing them models of how to do it, you're actually releasing them to express themselves in different ways. And then if they expand into sculpture and expand into jewelry making or something, then you open up even more windows and doors for them too, don't you? Yeah, I think that's great. And then if you type in, say, how to define creativity in high school visual art into Google Scholar, it turns up all of these resources. If you click on cite, then it gives you the citation that you can cut and paste. And then if you go to the article, you can look at related articles. You can look at all 6 versions of the article, and you have a huge number of resources. And if it's got the resource on the right-hand side, you can locate it. If it doesn't have the resource on the right-hand side, it means that you can't locate it, though with books you can sometimes locate it. So there's ample resources there to look at. And then it's worth thinking about how can you dig deeper into the theory behind what is creativity. So if you left out art, you could just go to what is creativity, and you could come up with some theory and scholars who've examined what is creativity there as well. So that sounds very doable. And then if we go back to Nancy's project, and so Nancy also has a very interesting project with kindergarten students who benefit from explicit direct instruction and then you could look at what the teachers do. And I like the way Nancy's got, besides herself as the 5th or 6th or 7th teacher, she's got 4 other teachers, some experienced, some new graduates, and then there's another 1 or 2 or 3 trainee teachers, and they're all doing things. But it'd be interesting to look at experienced teachers and what they say, and what are some of the methods that they use in the preschool, kindergarten teaching, story and music. And then it would also be looking at some students in the different classes and in her own class. And then you could group these students as well. So Nancy, what are your thoughts on the project that you're working on?
Yeah, I'm still confused. I think I'll take my time to think about it more. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, if you feel confused, one of the things you can do is a mind map. And in your mind map, you can try and make it as simple as possible. And so in the center of the mind map, you can put what's your key idea, and the key idea or thought of or question could be successful or helpful teaching of, say, prep. And then you could, around that, build your ideas in the mind map. And so there could be 4 teaching examples. Experienced teachers suggest, and they could say helpful teaching, and they might suggest A, B, and C as the helpful teaching. And then, so you could do an interview, ask them, what do you think are the most effective methods, and they could rank it. And if you've got 3 or 4 teachers who are ranking their teaching methods, I mean, that's one way you could start. And you can change all of this as you go along, but that's one sort of starting point, asking the question, what works for me? Now, another starting point is you can go to your DIBELS baseline, and you could look at, say, maths or literature, reading tests, and you could look at that and how that's teaching, and you could say, what's the method? So I guess you've got to choose your starting point, which is sometimes what this mind map does. It says, what are you starting with? What's the major thing that you're wanting to work with? And once you got your starting point, then you do your literature review, and then you do your method, and then you do your results that come from your method. And your method often has 2 samples, your beginning sample and then your final sample, and then you got your results, and then you got your analysis and discussion. But it sounds like, am I correct, Nancy, that the big question is, what's the central starting point? And as you've said, it could be something like literature, or it could be something rather different. It could be the method that is of the strategy that's being used. And so you've got a few different things to decide on. Yeah.
Can I just talk to Nancy for a minute? Because I feel like sometimes, I can't see her face, but sometimes, Nancy, it might be helpful to talk to other teachers on your stage, or your like for me, it's my faculty head, because there might be areas in the school that they're really interested in looking at more closely, and they might have some ideas about what would be useful, but they also know the kids that you're working with and the staff. And it can be either or. Like, some of the research I've seen previously has been just between teachers, like comparing a really experienced teacher with like a young teacher with a really experienced teacher, and looking at different ways that they're doing things. In kindergarten, it could be around phonics. Like, there's now a huge push away from like constructivist learning back towards explicit teaching with like phonics, of learning how to, read and spell. and it doesn't have to be across a whole grade level. You can just pick out like 3 or 4 sample students at different levels and just work really intensively with those students. So somebody in your school might have ideas about what would be useful, so that it's not just something on the side, like it's something that you're actually doing in the classroom. Are you in a classroom?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So something that you're already working on, or that you love doing in the classroom, that you're enjoying, that you can just put a whole documentation framework around and try some different things and see how they work. It doesn't have to be this huge thing that's outside of what you're doing. Like, it's meant to support what you're doing in the classroom. It's not meant to be disconnected from that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I guess we have the things that we love and enjoy doing. So I agree with Kate there. If you choose something that you're passionate about, you love doing, enjoy doing, you're successful with. And then the other side, Kate, I think, is the things that we struggle with as well. So if you're an English
True.
teacher, you may struggle with maths, or if you're a maths teacher, you may struggle with English. And at some stage, it's worth doing work on the struggle areas, though you may not want to
True.
do that in this project. But talk to teachers about the struggle areas. Google the struggle areas and say, I struggle with this maths or this literature or this classroom management or working with certain staff or we're working on both the things that we love doing, and then I guess we are also working with the struggle areas as well. I mean, another struggle area, which we're not going to talk about, is the whole ups and downs of our emotions as teachers. And I guess you could research that too, Kate. We're not going to have time here, but teacher well-being is so important.
Yeah.
We can handle the ups and downs. Yeah. Parent confrontations, I think, are increasing.
Documentation strategies, like how to
Yes,
how to streamline documentation strategies. Like it's
yes,
really, but it's about finding something that's happening for us and working on
yes,
that, I guess, is what I mean, first term of kindergarten, for 100 words, like all the sight words, they've got to get their first 100 words under their belt. How do you make that happen?
yes,
Something very, related to what's happening for you.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. And there's so many ways that, do you send those 100 words home and work your way through it? And there's so many strategies, aren't there? So does that help, Nancy, obviously there's a lot to think about, but I think as you work your way through it, and then we're here to discuss this next Monday night in 7 days' time as well. So there's time to work through this. And I really like what you said, Kate, about talking to other experienced teachers and teachers around. What do you think are some good areas to work on? We're not alone. We're not solo in what we're doing here. So I hope tonight has been helpful. It's given you some insights. It's given you some resources, and I'll send around some notes in the next few days. That'll give you some insights and resources that you'll be able to use. And then we meet again in 7 days' time as well, so you can bring your ideas along. You've got all the resources on Moodle as well. And then you've got other resources if you want to go to Google or go to Google Scholar and type in your area of research that you're looking at doing. There's plenty to look at. So there's plenty written on action research, plenty written on action research in education, and plenty written on action research in education in the areas that you're looking at. And I'll look forward to working with you on this. You should be able to enjoy this and get a lot of value out of it. And it's something that you'll be able to use in the years to come. Any final questions?
Maybe a biggish question. Can you just kind of nail down the difference between methods, like the methods that I want to use, and my methodology? So my methodology is going to be more qualitative than quantitative. Am I thinking along the right lines of defining my methodology?
Yeah, I think you'll have a rough idea of the method that you're going to use, and there'll be lots of details, like there'll be how many students, and there are details about the ethics and what's ethical and how you'll do it. And then with the methodology, if you go to a methodology book or go to Google Scholar and type in about methodology, then quantitative is the big word for where you get numbers, like you use a Likert scale and you say, what do you think about that? I think we often find that's a bit limiting in that it gives you wonderful numbers and it looks good in graphs, but often you get as much insight, if not more, from simply asking questions and qualitatively looking at it, because the human mind can think through the complexities, and you could do an interview with the student or with the teacher and ask what do they think, and then eventually you may have to do the quantitative. But
So I guess I'm just wanting to know, like for the research proposal, the first 2,000 words, you just wanted me to outline the fact that I will start with like qualitative, like data collection.
yes,
That's the method, like that's the methodology that I'm going to pursue, and maybe just mention some of the paths that I'm planning to go down, and then that will unfold in the report later.
It will, and you can always reverse engineer what you find. Some of the best research actually goes back and writes the introduction last and changes the methodology to suit how things are unfolding. And so there's often quite a bit of reverse engineering that works back from results that are unfolding back to these are the questions I should be asking. And it doesn't always work as smoothly from the beginning.
So the proposal's really just like predominantly the literature review with just a pretty big idea of where we're going, so that you can see where we're heading and where the literature's supporting and that's just kind of the basis where we just start to find our feet, is what you're thinking?
Yes, yes. And certainly you're giving thought to the method you're using and the methodology that you're using. And you're thinking, this is likely to work. And what are the reasons why it will work? And so with phonics, if I'm trying this approach to phonics, what are the reasons it works? And so if we've got picture clues in the books that we're using, what are the reasons the picture clues are working and why is it helpful? Because instinctively, picture clues seem to be the wrong thing because you want them to learn the words. But I guess the picture clues give context and confidence. And so then they do remember the words. Whereas if you don't have the picture clues, they don't remember. They don't want to move on beyond the picture clues, though. Some students do. Some students gallop on beyond the picture clues, and then others just, where's the pictures? I'll go to comics.
Sure. Okay, thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? If there's no more questions, look forward to seeing you in 1 week's time. If you have troubles or questions in between now and then, send me an email. Look forward to seeing you next time, and bring your questions and ideas along then as well. I'm sure you'll all do well, and they're great ideas, loving them. I wish I could do all these projects myself. I think they're really interesting. See you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Bye.
Yeah.